Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight I am joined by the multiple award-winning author of Dark Ride, November Road, The Long and Faraway Gone, as well as Gunshot Straight and Whiplash River, his most recent novel, which just came out, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, a month ago or so, is Double Barrel Bluff. That's right, it's your favorite writer of mine, Lou Berney. Lou, how the heck are you?
I'm excellent, really good. Usually
Good.
you'd catch me on a fair to good day, but today's excellent, so
I'm
looking
glad
good.
I caught you on a very good day. So there's a lot that we could go over. I know your time is limited, and uh, I want to start really at the very beginning because when I was doing my limited research, I do because on some guests because I usually want to kind of keep it fresh.
Mhm.
You had a short story collection out that's no longer in print. Is that correct? Is that something that's going to
Wow.
be coming back at any point?
No, I don't think so. That was written long ago, when I was in my early 20s in grad school, a collection of short stories, and I don't even know how good that is, or I expect it's pretty bad, so I don't want to see it come into the light of day.
Yeah, so it's called what's it called? The Road to Bobby Joe and Other Stories, published in 1991. Prior to that, you had something in the New Yorker. Now, it's hard because it's so far back. I mean, that was in 89, so it's not like, nowadays where everything is online. You really have to go into their archive to find it. What was that specifically? Was it a short story? Was it a feature article?
Short story.
Oh, wow. So that's
Yep.
pretty incredible. So how old were you then when you had a freaking short story in the New Yorker?
I think I was 24. So yeah, it was a pretty big deal at the time. It still is a big deal. I'm
Yeah,
incredibly proud of that.
absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. And then I'm assuming the short story collection. I mean, I've talked to authors before. There was one author in particular, Ben Laurie, who he had a
Mm.
collection. He couldn't sell it unless he had a story. And then, long story short, an editor at one of the houses knew one of the editors there. He had a story in the New Yorker. They immediately were like, okay, we're going to buy your collection. So was it one of those things that really having that story in the New Yorker was what got you that short story collection deal?
Absolutely. It was actually an editor who read the story in the New Yorker and called me and said, "Hey, do you want to publish a collection?" And I'm like, "Well, I need to write the other 10 stories first, but yeah." And so that's how it worked. I had the editor before I had almost any of the other stories.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So at that point, how old were you again when you said you had the story published?
24, I think.
20,
24, 20, 23,
24.
24.
So essentially you were out of college, but you were in or
I was
were
in
you in grad
graduate
school?
school. Yeah,
You were in graduate
University of
school.
Massachusetts. Yeah.
So how many stories had you written up until that point? I mean, the New Yorker is essentially like the holy grail for short story
Mhm.
writers to
Yeah,
read. I
yeah.
mean, you hit that really early on. How many other how many short stories had you been writing at that point?
I think I'd written about five, maybe four or five up until that point. So yeah, it was really early and unexpected and kind of shocking in a lot of ways.
And this was just sending it, like submitting it cold directly. It wasn't like you had an agent or anything. You were just sending
No,
it
no agent,
like every
no
other
agent.
writer, just straight there. How many
No.
had you submitted others? I mean, the five stories prior, or this was like the first story you submitted to them?
No, I think again, we're going way back in time, Robert.
Oh
This is
yeah.
like beyond the reach of my memory, but I will say that I think I only sent out one other story before that one. So it was really early and really unexpected and an incredible piece of good luck. Believe me, I knew it was
Had you
coming.
had you published elsewhere prior to the New Yorker?
No, I had been a journalist, and so I had written non-feature stuff. I mean, I'm sorry, non-fiction stuff, but I'd never published fiction before then.
Wow. Seriously, I don't know. Some writers probably don't appreciate the fact that your very first published piece was with a New Yorker. So, all right, and then
Well, I
that
did
your
follow
short.
up. I followed up with two novels that never got published, so
Yeah.
that kind of paid
Well,
the dues on
that
it.
also
So,
happens for the writers, and we're going to get into that too. At what point you were right? You said journalism. You were writing some nonfiction stuff, reporting. What was do you remember the very first creative thing you had done, or whether it be a short story, poem, script, anything like that?
well, I really loved writing stories and making up stories when I was a kid. I had two older sisters who loved books and loved stories and kind of instilled that in me. And so I remember like making up stories and writing little stories when I was really young. Um, but I don't think I took it seriously until I got to college, where I started writing sort of more creative nonfiction and really got into like Tom Wolfe and Joan Didion and writers like that, and started trying to, emulate that. But I didn't really start writing fiction until I got to graduate school.
Okay. And yeah, you have a Wikipedia page in case you weren't aware. And
Awesome.
whenever I have an author on who has a Wikipedia, I like to do kind of like a Rich Eisen celebrity true or false. So part of your early life and education here from Wikipedia says he was dismissed from several jobs as a teenager, which included positions in photography and property maintenance. True or
Yeah,
false?
true. I got fired from, I want to say there was around 9 jobs I got fired from, but it might have been more than that. I got fired from a lot of jobs in my teenage years, usually through incompetence, but also a lot of times lack of effort or the combination of the two.
And you were working and you did work at a not grocery store. You worked at a movie theater.
I worked in movie theaters. Yeah.
Because I'm reading this now, the which by the way, coming up on 10-year anniversary. Congratulations.
That's right. Yeah, thank you very much. I love that book. I loved writing that book because it tapped into so many things in my my own experience in movie theaters. So
Right.
I love
And this is a book that I think won every single award that year when it came
it.
out.
It won a bunch of awards. I was really fortunate with that. Yeah.
Because I remember I had this on Kindle, and at BoucherCon, Chris Holm, our mutual friend Chris Holm, was telling me it was one of his all-time favorite books. So you were there signing, so I grabbed. I wanted to get an actual physical copy. At least this was now a couple years ago, but this was already in its 12th printing. So I'm sure at this point
Really?
probably you're a little bit up higher. But I mean, again, 10 years having a book still in print for some readers who don't really know, like that's a huge deal. So some books don't stay in print more than
Yeah.
3 or 4 years. So yeah, 10-year anniversary. This is coming up, but it opens up in a movie theater. Now, granted, something bad happens, but like in high school, I mean, that was my job. I worked in movie theaters too, so immediately I was like, it
Yeah.
kind of took me back to working at a movie theater. I
Yeah, it
don't know
was
about you.
great to visit her. I loved working in a movie theater. And back in the day, like kids would work there, like teenagers. Now I don't know if it's different now or not, but it was like a really kind of tribal thing if you worked in a movie theater back then. It was really wonderful.
Oh yeah, I mean that was my high school job, and then I ended up and when I turned 18, I became an assistant manager, started working the booth. Um,
Nice.
and
Fancy.
and then that was and then in college I was still living, it was locally, so I was still working full time, and I would
How
take
many
my
times did you get
laptop up
fired?
with me.
How
What's
many
that?
times did you get fired? How many times did you
I
get fired from your
I
job?
did not get fired,
Oh,
and we did not get robbed
come
either.
on.
So
Uh,
there was that too. But
yeah.
I would take my laptop up to the booth, so I would run them in between sets.
Hmm.
I would do writing. So
Nice.
that was a great job. I loved it. So
In
but
between
obviously
shows, back in my day, in between shows, we would just drink contraband liquor, is what we would do. So you were probably
they
more
were say
sophisticated.
I was a teen a little bit later after you, so they were a
Yeah.
little bit, they had the security, you had more security cameras and stuff. There was a little bit more
Yeah, we didn't have
oversight that they were
those.
having.
Yeah, thank goodness.
So this though was your third novel. Obviously, your first novel came was published. When was that published? I had it written here. 91?
Two,
No,
20,
no, no, no. 91
2010.
was your collection.
Yeah, first novel was 2010.
2010. So, and you said before that you had had two other unpublished novels. Well, first of all, I want to talk about the short story collection. So, at that point, you had the story in the New Yorker, and
Mm,
then you basically had a publishing deal based on that, but you had to write more stories for the short story collection.
right.
Did those stories get published elsewhere, or were they
Hmm.
mostly just all original stories in the collection?
No, I would say most of them got published in various literary magazines. One was in Ploughshares, I think. One was in the Southern Review, maybe. So yeah, they were mostly were published other places.
And I saw somewhere, I forget where I saw it, but it was compared to like T.C. Boyle short stories.
Wow.
And
I
and
Yeah, I
T.C. Boyle is
mean,
one of my favorite contemporary short story writers. So that's why I
mine
asked you if it was
too.
going to be back in print because I'd love to check it out because
Yeah.
obviously that was more literary. You moved at some point clearly towards crime, mystery, thriller. Did that or did any of those short stories initially have kind of the seeds
Yeah.
of crime in them?
I feel like it's such a blurry line between so-called literary fiction and so-called genre fiction. So for me, it was a very subtle, easy move from literary to crime because basically a lot of my literary stories had criminal elements in them. and a lot of my crime stories, have literary elements in them. So, it's just one of those kind of things. I think those borders have broken down a little bit over the years, and kind of it's just now one more big tent than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and for anybody who reads usually like the best, American
Mhm.
mystery or mystery suspense, they'll oftentimes see, yes, there'll be stories in there from Alfred Hitchcock's mystery magazine, Ellery Queen, but there'll also be from the New Yorker. There'll also be
Right,
from some literary journals that,
right.
are deal with crime or mystery. So then you wrote two novels. Were those more literary, more crime, kind of like, or were they kind of a mixture of both? I mean, what type of books would you say those were?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in a very expansive way, the first one had a crime element to it, but it was also kind of more of a big, sweepy novel. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I've never been asked that. I think the first one definitely had crime elements in it and could have been categorized as a crime novel and maybe would have sold if it had been, because that's one of the advantages, obviously, is having a shelf for a particular genre. The second one was maybe more just straight ahead general fiction, I would guess.
And around that time, before Shotgun Straight was published, well, let's talk about that because the new book came out. It's the third book in the series. Book one was published. I'm trying to do math in my head. 14 years ago? I mean,
Right.
so you're revisiting a character who had two novels previously, and it's been a while. Um, how did that book come about? How'd that character come about for you?
Boy, I mean, I think that character was just, I'm a big fan of Elmore Leonard. And I remember I wrote that book in 2008, and it was during the writer's strike. I'd been doing some screenwriting. And so during the WGA writer's strike in Hollywood, I had to stop writing scripts. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get back to my fiction roots and write a novel. And I just love the idea of taking my stab at the genre Elmore Leonard kind of created and owned, which is, I guess, the caper novel. And so that character kind of came my version of what I would do with those circumstances in that kind of novel. And it just kind of came really easily in a character I really love writing. And it kind of was enough momentum to sustain three novels for me.
In your short story collection and the story in the New Yorker, those have been published under the name Lewis Berney, but
Yeah.
Shotgun Straight came out under Lou Berney. So what was there I mean, what kind of conversation or who had made that decision, or was that an executive decision? I mean, you started because like it always fascinates me when some writers like like Paul Tremblay used to be Paul G. Tremblay, our
Oh, really?
mutual friend Chris Holm used to be, he'd publish under Chris F. Holm. You know what I mean? Like there are times where certain authors will use their names and then they'll kind of adjust them, over the course of their
Yeah.
career.
And I think Chris Holm, our mutual friend, I think his next book, he's going to go back to his, like the name we all know him by, which is Cookie Holm. And so I'm looking forward to him embracing his roots sort of like in that way. No, that's a good story. I sold the story to the New Yorker, and the editor there, this great guy, asked me, would you like to put, up until then I put Lou Berney on everything. And then he's like, you might consider saying Louis Berney. It just sounds more serious. And I was like, all right. I mean, I didn't know I was 24 years old and I was
Yeah.
going to be published in the New Yorker. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll be Louis Berney. And then when I got back to Gutshot Straight, I was old enough to realize, I just need to be, who I am. And that's why I went back to Lou Berney.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So when did you get into the screenwriting?
It was around like 2003, 2002, somewhere around then. It was just something I always loved. I loved storytelling and characters. And so with film and TV, it was just sort of a way to explore that in a different kind of way. And I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot, both as a fiction writer and, a writer in general, going both ways with that kind of craft stuff.
Now, film, TV, I mean, publishing is hard, but film, TV is even harder, at least to get something produced and
Mm,
actually put on screen.
yeah.
Um, and from what I can tell, I mean, you've had one produced actual screenplay. What was it? Angels Sing. That was made into a movie. Harry Connick Jr.
Mm.
Starred in it. What was? I mean, what's more exciting, having a book published or having a movie made based on your script?
Well, I mean, when you get a book published, it's you. It's all you. It's your characters. Every decision has been yours. So there's no comparison to that. Like I feel like it's like your own creation. Whereas with a movie, so much changes, especially if you're the writer. You have so little influence in terms of how the movie gets made most times. And even though you're really proud of it, it's also not just yours. It's a lot of other people and a lot of decisions that you might have made a different decision, but it turned out a certain way. And so it's exciting to see your name on the screen, but I would say a book being published is pretty awesome, just because it's all you, as you know.
So when you wrote Gunshot Straight, did you feel that was a character that you would continue? Like when you sold it, was it a one book deal, two book deal? I mean, was the idea that you would continue this character?
It was a one book deal, and I think I hadn't even thought about it. I think I was just like, here, I'm gonna write this one book. I didn't really think about it as a series, but then it did pretty well and it got nominated for some awards. And I realized how much I loved the character, which was the important thing. And I thought, okay, this might be good for a second novel as well. Because I do like, like when Elmore Leonard would revisit characters and see them from different angles. And to me, that was pretty interesting. But I didn't want to do a kind of series that was just the same thing over and over again. So that's why there's only three of them as opposed to 12 of them or 15 of them, because each time I had to figure out like what's a different story for this character? Where are they in their lives now? And that's what was interesting to me.
Are you a writer who again, I always hate the term, but are you like a plotter, pantser? Like how do you typically approach the novels?
I think I'm probably in between. I do a lot of planning, a lot of mapping out and kind of just thinking about where the story's going to go. But then there's a lot of improvisation along the way. A lot changes, a lot comes in, a lot goes. So I would say I'm pretty much a combination of the two, plotter and pantser.
So like a novel like The Long and Faraway Gone, you're dealing with, I don't want to say necessarily dual timelines because it's not like, I mean, you are kind of jumping around here and
Mm.
there. But it's not like, one of those novels where it's like constant back and forth. But I mean, there's
Right.
like flashbacks or whatever else, and you're dealing with essentially two different characters. When you're dealing with something of that magnitude as opposed to just following one character, does that really change the way that you're approaching how you're doing that book?
Yeah, I think there's more planning involved. Like you just have to kind of, it's like an orchestra versus a quartet or something. Like, when you write a book like that, you got a ton of different instruments you got to keep track of and when they're playing and when they're being silent and how do you braid it together, all the various storylines and subplots and timelines. So it becomes a lot more complicated. It doesn't necessarily become more difficult, it just becomes more complicated. Because I think a first person single point of view character like Dark Ride, which I had came out last year, that was just as hard, kind of focusing on one character and working that out. But it required kind of less architecture, I would say.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. So we have Dark Ride, like you said, came out last year, and as far as I could tell, this is written in first person present tense.
Mhm.
All the rest of your books that you've published, at least so far, third person past tense. So this was certainly, at least in terms of the narrative setup, a departure from what you had been doing previously. What was the idea behind, like, why did you feel that that story needed to be told from the first person present point of view?
Well, I think for me, a lot of that book kind of hinges on an unreliable narrator, not a narrator who's lying, but a narrator who kind of is in over his head and doesn't quite see what we're seeing as readers. And to me, making it first person instead of third person kind of creates an intimacy that allows us to start missing the same things that he's missing. And so, to me, it felt much smarter to go first person with a story like that and a character like that than I would in other books. Plus, I didn't want to shift points of view. And so I only had to focus on one first person voice, and that felt pretty reasonable to me.
The two prior books that you had written said that you hadn't published, had those were those third person, were those first person, or like was Dark Ride the very first time you had done first person in a novel?
One of the books that didn't get published was first person present tense. So I had done that before, but again, I had failed badly at it. So it was a little bit of a risky thing.
Is it
But I
failed
enjoyed it.
badly because it just didn't get published? Because, good books don't get published for whatever reason. Is that, I mean, are you going to ever like kind of like revisit any of, either of those two
No,
books?
that's a good point. And I should say I didn't, it was a good book, a book I'm proud of. So you're right. It wasn't a failure. But that said, I would never go back and revisit books that are from years ago just because I'm in such a different place now. It wouldn't really make sense to go back and say, oh, it'd be like coming to a stranger's manuscript in a lot of ways. So I try to just focus on going forward and what's next.
So your very first novel, again, Gunshot Straight, came out 2010. The most recent one came out like it was just like a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, right.
But again, that's now been 14 years, and I think as most writers, we like to think that we evolve and we grow and we become better writers throughout the years. If someone reads Gunshot Straight and then they jump straight to Double Barrel Bluff, do you feel like they would notice some kind of maybe change in your writing style and like the way the characters are developed, the storytelling? I mean, do you feel that there's anything that has really changed in terms of your writing throughout the years?
I feel like I feel like they're, yeah, that's a good question. Wow, I don't know. I feel like Double Barrel Bluff is a completely different kind of novel than Gutshot Straight was. So I think that kind of like liberates it from comparison in some ways. It's the same characters, it's the same tone, but it's a very different kind of plot and a very different kind of arc for the characters. So I'm not sure my writing has changed as much as sort of like the way in which I build the layers of a story. And again, this is really hard for me to talk about. I mean, for writers, as you know, it's much easier just to write the thing than to think and talk about it. So like that's my best shot, basically, to explain it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
no.
know.
Well, are you currently teaching writing?
I do teach writing at Oklahoma City University. Yeah.
What specifically are you teaching? Like if someone
I
takes your class, what do they typically go through in a semester or the course?
hell, hell.
They go,
They go through hell. I'm brutal. No, I'm not. I'm very nice. I try to keep it as simple as possible. And I focus first on process because I think that's not taught enough. The idea of like every writer has their own process. Like some of us might be heavy and outliners. Other people might want to jump around in the creative process between brainstorming and revising and drafting. So I really try to get every writer to find their own way of doing things because otherwise you're going to feel very constricted and very crippled, which I've seen happen to a lot of writers. So that's like my big thing. And second, I just want writers to do the kind of thing that really is their thing. So I try not to give any advice that would like limit them and try to give advice that opens things up for them. So like I'm never like, don't do this. I'm always like, try this instead, or try this and try to get to what they're doing at their heart and what they're passionate about.
but are you teaching people in your classes, are they just working on stories? Are they working on novels? What specifically is,
They work
or
on
poems
story.
even?
No, I do teach intro to creative writing where I teach poetry, which is funny because I can't write poetry, but I write it with them. It's theirs is far better than mine. But my fiction writing students, I mostly are doing short stories, unless it's an advanced class, then they can be working on a novel. So it just kind of depends.
And so for you, I mean, there was, between November Road and Dark Ride, there was a bit of a gap.
Yeah,
And I remember talking to you briefly about your con a couple years ago, and I forget how it came about, but I guess, I mean, there was a
I've been
gap just because
drinking.
you weren't able to, I mean, you just weren't happy with, I guess, the project you'd been working at the time and or whatever else. Like for you, at what point? You're not an author who necessarily is on like, one of these authors who is like, they have to like every year they have to have a new book come out. I mean,
Right.
you basically, you have your teaching everything else, you're writing these novels.
Mhm.
When do you feel like how long does it usually typically take for you to feel like, okay, this book is done? I mean, how long do you take, I guess? And I'm sure every book is different, but I mean, like coming from it from somebody who teaches writing, I mean, I'm assuming you're probably coming from it also from a different point of view than, some
Mhm.
of us hacks that just, just,
Ah,
sitting down and just, churning out the books to, get stuff out there.
uh, it just depends on every book, and I mean, you're right. But I would say ballpark, if it's going well, it's about a year and a half to 2 years for me per book is about the right rhythm for me to like write and absorb it and sit with it and have it come out. If it goes badly, it'll be longer than that. But generally a year and a half or 2 years for me. which makes me a slow writer by crime standards, but probably a pretty quick writer by literary standards.
Yeah. Real quick. So, yeah, our time is limited. So, did you tell us real quick, like the most recent book? What's going on in that? Give us the elevator pitch. Make sure
No,
the pitch that makes that is gonna make people go and do the one click right now.
can't do it. No, no, no,
All
no.
right. So, how
I do
about
have a new
then?
book coming out. I mean, I do have a new book coming out next fall
Yes,
called
I wanted to talk
Crooks.
about that. The
But
Crooks, a family portrait. What can you give us a little sneak on that?
uh yeah, I'm terrible at this. It's I should
That's
have had
okay.
him in front of me.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's a big family epic, a big family crime epic. Kind of my version of The Godfather, but which means it's very different than The Godfather.
Is this you said epic? When you say epic, I mean, like, is it longer than I think right now, The Long and Faraway Gone is probably your longest books
I
so
don't know
far,
if
at least
it's
published.
I don't know if it's longer than Long and Faraway Gone, but it's pretty long and it covers like 60 years and three continents and different ages of family members. So it's sweeping in that sense.
Are you still doing scripts here and there?
Yeah, I am. But mostly lately it's been novel stuff, but I'm definitely still got my hand in screenwriting stuff because that's a really fun way to work too.
Are there times where you like how many scripts would you say you've written at this point?
Oh gosh, feature scripts, TV script, probably, I don't know, over the years, like 30 or 40 probably, I guess.
Oh wow.
I mean, that's
Do you
over the years.
find
That's over 25 years or something, or
Yeah,
20 years.
do you find you enjoy one over the other?
No, I think it kind of depends. Like I'm enjoying when I go back and forth between them the most. That's when it's kind of nice to switch things up and go from, a TV script to a novel, and back and forth, and they both become very enjoyable.
Do you find that you can So I think I remember Dennis Lee Hain was talking about with a novel, he really needs concentration to write a
Hmm.
chapter or whatever else, as opposed to if he's working on a TV or movie script, he can just sit down and work on a page or two and get up and come back and
Yeah,
forth. I mean, do you find that's kind of the same, where you can just kind of
yeah,
drop in at any point?
same. Yeah, same, 100% the same. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. Is there anything with any of your scripts that's in development? Anything you can talk about? Anything people can look
Not
forward to?
really, nothing useful. They're in various stages of development, so it's the kind of thing that nothing may happen for the next 2 years, or all of a sudden four things may happen over the next 2 years. So, the best thing, like any writer can do, as you know, is just to focus on whatever the next project is and let all that stuff just work out itself on its own.
Have you adapted any of your stuff or all of your stuff?
Not in a long time. I think I did an adaptation for of Gutshot Straight for a producer many years ago that I didn't like. They liked it, but I didn't like it, and nothing ever came of it. But I might at some point do an adaptation of one of my scripts. I mean, one of
Yeah.
my novels. Yeah,
Okay. If people want to stalk you online, where's the best place they can do that?
LouBerney.com. I'm also on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook.
Perfect. So again, the most recent book is Double Barrel Bluff. Will we be seeing this character? Will we be seeing Shake again in the future, do you think?
Yeah, I would say no, but I might change my mind. So you never know. If I can come up with a good idea that's worth writing, for sure, I'd go back to that character because I really love him.
So, just real quick, in the last minute we have, do you have, was it easy to come back to that character once you had that idea in place? Was it felt like you
Yeah.
never really, stepped away for probably like over a decade?
Yeah, I mean that those are characters who just feel like family at this point to me. And so it's like it's a happy reunion when you go back to those characters on the page.
All right, perfect. So, all right, Lou, thank you so much for hanging out. Everybody, again, the newest book is Double Barrel Bluff. He has a lot of other books out there, definitely. And if you can, track down that short story collection. I know I'm going to keep an eye out in the
Yeah.
used bookstores and stuff. So,
Yeah.
thanks again, Lou. We'll see everybody later. Bye.
Thanks, Robert.